Hello. Share this. We'll go for YouTube. Go follow on YouTube. So to go. Since I'm doing it together. In under a minute, we'll start effectively. And like I said, I have seen from the flyer or the poster, we'll be talking on writing a research proposal. So we're talking about how to write a research proposal. And this webinar is organized by Ferdsilinks. At Ferdsilinks, what we do is we are into data science, and a significant proportion of what we do is helping students, masters, PhD, undergraduate, with their academic writing. So we have encountered a lot of challenges that students face. We have seen students who face so many challenges. And one of the major challenges I always face, how do I come up with a research topic? How do I draft a research proposal? And so we thought it wise to bring us today a training, a webinar on writing research proposals. So a bit about me. I'm Ferdinand, a PhD fellow from University of Boya, and with more than 7 years experience in academic writing, guiding students across different fields, from conceptualization of their research topic, right up to producing the final copy of their thesis, be it master's, PhD, and so I'll be the instructor for today. So if you are following from YouTube, you have questions, you can just send in your questions as while there's somebody who is checking on our social media to be able to attend to, you can equally join us via Zoom to have one-on-one conversation. But if you're on YouTube, you can still follow us. Any questions, we'll be ready to attend to. So we are starting right away, no time to waste. Others will only join us as we make progress. So today's outline is that we'll first start by looking at what a research proposal is, what constitute the components of a research proposal, or what are the different or various parts involved in a research proposal. Once we understand the various parts involved in a research proposal, we'll try to look at each of the parts, what you need to write, how you can go about writing. Now, this is a series of webinars, so today we'll just give an outline. We'll not go into details. Subsequently, as you follow, you'll be able to know from each step what needs to be done at every level, from the topic formulation to developing your background, to the research problem, objectives, stating hypotheses, and so on and so forth. Those are various dimensions that we'll review in a series of free webinars that Ferdsilinks will bring to you. So the first thing that we want to talk on now is what is a research proposal? What is a research proposal? Now, a research proposal can be looked upon as a document that describes the planned research approach. Now, you want to carry out a study, you need to develop a research proposal. And this research proposal basically tells you that I'm undertaking a study on so, and this is why the study is important. This is how I'm going to achieve it. And this is when I think the study will take. So in effect, a research proposal basically outlines the various things that you intend to do. First, it informs the reader, it informs the audience or the person of interest what the study is all about. It informs the audience what the study is all about. Then after that, the next thing is that it establishes the necessity of the study. For instance, and this study will examine the recent phenomenon that we have witnessed. If you have been following news, you know that so many companies are laying off workers, especially in the tech domain. We've seen companies like Facebook lay off 12,000 workers, Microsoft 18,000, I think, Twitter more than a half, and so many global companies, they're laying off workers. And so that becomes a concern for us. But what is happening that companies are laying off workers? So in your research proposal, you just want to identify maybe your area of interest is employees retention. So you want to carry out a study on this particular. So the next thing is, why is it important that you want to conduct this study? Why? And the why part of the study, as we'll see, tries to establish the problem that is at stake and needs to be solved. And if we don't solve the problem, then there are consequences that we'll face. So the first thing is we start by establishing what the study is all about, the relevance of the study, and how you intend to go about that study. That's now actually the research proposal outlining the approach that you intend to use. So you have to outline the approach that you will use and the estimated time frame. So you must talk about the estimated time frame. This will take me about a year, take me 6 months, it will take me, and budget. So in a research proposal, basically, it's a document that describes the research process that researcher intends to undertake in the course of conducting a study. That is the purpose. Now, if we put it like this, it may look too simplistic, and you may just look at it and say, okay, but then it is important for you to understand that there are different types of research proposals. We can basically classify research proposal into theory. A research proposal before you get into a university, maybe for admission, like you are going for a PhD, and I don't think that there's any university that will grant you a PhD position without you presenting a proposal. Then from the proposal, the university evaluates and see your suitability, and maybe in terms of the field and in terms of institution. That is one form of research proposal. Now, this is quickly related to, or in one way, the same research proposal that when you are already in school, you may provide or submit to your supervisor to go through so that they decide, okay, this is what you're working on. So there's no big difference between these two, but one, you do it while you are not yet admitted to say, okay, I want to come and study this in this university. They check whether you will be able to go through the program. The school offers a subject and who can be supervised, or you can propose your supervisors, and some universities do. So once you have successfully written this, it is part of your application process. However, the practice in other universities is that you get in and you submit your research proposal, and they use it to assign you to a specific supervisor. So that's one way. You have to maybe defend and say, okay, this is what I intend to study. This is the approach I want to take, and so on and so forth. So you need to do that. Now, the next and one of the most important forms of research proposal you write is more or less for grants. You want to apply for a grant, you need to attach a proposal. Maybe you want to get grant to even conduct a study, so you have to develop a proposal depending on the panel, and they see that, okay, you have an applied research, especially, and you need this amount of money. This study will take this time frame, and this amount of resources are required to have the enabling team to undertake the study. That is another form of research proposal. So in today's outline, we'll give generic perspective respect to. We are not too specific because we want to give an outline of the standard research proposal. In our subsequent webinars, we'll take each domain and we'll look at it in details and understand how to go about it, and with critical or concrete examples that contest errors that people are doing, and those that are winning, or those that are from top universities defended by others for their cases. So we'll bring different examples from different sources and from different fields. So that is the approach that we intend to in this series of webinars that we plan to have. Now, the next thing about this is, what are the components of a research proposal? We have established what it is, and we've tried to give in brief the different dimensions that you need to think of. We have also talked about the different types of research proposal. And one important thing is, why is a research proposal relevant? Why do you even need a research proposal? First, you want to convince that the study is relevant. You have identified a problem and that is relevant. So you may want to gain admission into university. And like we said, you cannot graduate from any university without doing some form of research. So you also have to present. And you want to be able to outline and say, these are the resources you need. This is who you will need to contact, and so on and so forth, to go through the study. So a research proposal is a blueprint of the study. It's a roadmap that you have, that you are saying, this is what I intend to do and how I need to go about it. So, assuming that that is understood, we now ask ourselves, what are the components of a research proposal? If you can see from my slides, the first thing is that we have an introduction, which will look at the different dimensions, the various aspects of the introduction. A bit about literature review. I will have to say a few things with respect to literature review. We have the methodology, which basically the how of the research, how you intend to go about it. We talk about the time frame, the budget, and the references. These are key aspects. It can be more, it can be less, depending on the institution. But these are cardinal elements when it comes to a research proposal. They are the pivots that defines what you need to do. Now, let's take the first part. The introduction starts from a title. You want to write a research proposal, you need to come up with a title. And so, what I've discovered is that many students, when they're about to conduct a study, they find it difficult to actually come out with a title. And the issue is that they have not identified a problem that they want to study. Once you identify a problem, the next most important thing is for you to do a kind of search in the external literature. You have to do some online search, go to different platforms. We have Google Scholar, we have different platforms, Scope articles you can have access to, you'll be able to. Scopus, we have Science Direct. There's so many platforms that offer scientific writing. Now, when writing your research title, there are certain things that you must take into account. Your title must be clearly specifying what you intend to study, which means your title must be specific enough. It should be concise, informative, and catchy. If I may ask you, if you have done research before, which I know most of us would have done it in one way or the other, what captivates you to read any scientific article? The first thing is, I say, title. And so if you want to go and say something before you even think of reading the abstract and going through the entire work, the first thing you read the title. So the title is very important. And so the title must be very explicit, informative, and catchy so that the person looking at it will see. Now, I always said, if you are doing a study, it's good for you to understand that in a research topic, what guides you are variables, the key things you need to study. And most of the times we have two key variables in a research topic. We have the dependent variable and the independent variable. And so when you want to write a topic, or you want to write your research proposal, you have thought of an area of study, you must identify the dependent variable and the independent variable. And in a modern research, they must be what? Either mediating or control variables. That is very important. Now take an example from the layoff of workers that we have already mentioned. Take, for instance, you have observed that companies are laying off workers. And so it becomes an area of concern. So it means there is something wrong that's causing companies to lay off workers. So the question is, that is the dependent variable. Because most of the times a study, you want to solve a problem that is affecting the dependent variable in your study. You want to solve a problem. So because companies are laying off workers, it becomes a concern for you. And so you choose to go online and verify what is happening and to research maybe in terms of employees retention, high employee turnover, and among others. And so what you try to do is that, okay, you have had your dependent variable, which is what is actually at stake and causing you to be wondering. And in the course of reading, you discover that there are different articles that says the current layoff of workers by companies is because of some says ChatGPT, AI is causing companies to lay off workers. You find a possible cause for companies to lay off workers. Others say companies overemployed during COVID-19, and so we have a post-COVID-19 effect. And so COVID-19 has contributed to companies laying off workers. So we have two possible reasons for why we have massive layoff of workers by companies. The layoff of workers is because the tech world is going through transformation, And this transformation or this economic crisis, we have a lot of economic depression, or people are saying there's economic depression, there's no depression, and the rest. But the truth is that companies are facing challenges. They're increasingly being unable to meet up with the demands, to pay the salaries of workers, to meet the costs, and so they want to lay off some workers. We have technology, we have COVID-19, we now have another possible, which is what? Economic depression and inflation. And so there are multiple reasons. Now, for you to be able to come up with your own area of interest, you need to carve out. Now, are you going to work with technology? Are you going to take COVID-19? Are you going to take depression, inflation, and many other factors? Those are possible causes or possible ways that you think that can be responsible for the high layoff of workers by companies. So now, what has happened with this information? You have identified a situation that is at stake, and you are looking for the possible source. Now, the possible source comes in as what? The independent variable. This is the independent variable. So we can start developing our research topic by saying that if you choose technology, say the effect of digital transformation on employees' retention, as an example. Or that is just a possible topic, the effect, maybe the relationship or whatsoever. Now, at this stage, if you are doing it undergraduate, it's very okay to take it. If you are doing master's or PhD level, you may need to go further. And especially with modern research, the only way you may want to add something new, many people have already conducted study on technology and employees retention or currently layoff of workers. People have talked about COVID-19. And so what new are you actually bringing to the table? That makes this relevant. So in order to solve this problem, you may bring in now what we call a mediator or a moderating variable. Now, well, when technology is affecting or companies are laying off workers and you are suspecting that it could be technology, but there are other factors that may be transmitting or influencing the effect of what? Technology on employees' retention. One could be what? The work culture, the organizational culture. So that now gives us a complete master's or PhD research topic that is relevant, maybe current and modern. As we'll progress, we'll see how some of these things come into play. So we're looking at the effect of technology on employees' retention, right? A moderating or a mediating role, and the mediating role of what? Organizational culture. So that is a complete research topic. Now, this is the advice I give to students. You should not just write in your work. If you identify an area of interest and you identify your key variables, research writing is not creative writing. It's not composition writing where you sit and imagine. You're not writing a novel. It's a scientific exercise that has some what? Rules and regulation. There is a methodology that you need to adopt in order to attain the result. So once you have identified this area of interest, we're thinking of technology, we're thinking of retention, we're thinking of what? The organizational culture. The next most important thing for you to do to be sure that your topic is so relevant, is current, and also what undertaking is to go for literature review, is to go and do a literature search, is to go and search online. Go to Google Scholar, go on Google and search your topic. My advice for you to be safe is that you should identify at least 10 to 15 articles that has your key variables of interest. We're saying that for your work to be relevant, you need to at least take some articles that are already working vis-a-vis what you have. In this case, I'm thinking that, okay, I need to identify an technology and employees retention, at least the two variables, maybe technology and organizational culture. And the best articles are those that have all your three key variables. You may ask me if you want to only undertake a research on and find articles that already have this same keyword. Why do you need to undertake the study again? We'll answer that as we progress. But remember, if you don't do this exercise, the probability that you go through your work with something that and meets global standard might be very challenging. The PhD that you need about 250 pages in some cases or more. So you know that there's a lot of writing. And since it's not creative writing, you need to be able to identify these relevant scientific articles to give you a backing that your topic is important. Now, if you search and you can't identify, there is something wrong with the topic. Now, what can be wrong? Either the topic is not very relevant, writing on it, or your idea is too novel. And if it is too novel, then it leads us to a form of research. You need more, or you need to do what? A kind of potential study. We'll go into this as we'll see. But at this particular point, my advice is that you should not undertake a study when you are not similar articles with the same key variables. If you do that, if you don't do this, you are up to a serious challenge which will take you a lot of time, a lot of stress, and you will not be able to give a scientific argument to your writings. You will not be able to establish the relevance. You will not be able to secure your gap. You will not be able to justify your study. And so it's not creative writing that you sit in your room and you're thinking and jotting and going. No. So that is the first thing that we have to establish with the research topic. Like we said, we're just giving an outline. We'll come back, we'll take series of examples. Now, once we have established a research topic and you know that the topic is relevant, the topic others are working on it or have already worked on it, and you are just trying to identify your own gap, you can now go to the next part, which is an abstract. Now, things to note. An abstract is a summary of your proposal, highlighting how you intend to go about it and the expected outcome. Remember, although it might seem as the second thing, an abstract is always the last thing you write when it comes to scientific writing. It's a summary of what you will do, but it's the last thing that you write. So we'll get back to an abstract and talk about the details of an abstract when we have gone through the other aspect. Maybe not today, but an abstract is just basically a summary. It may give, I'm working on this, I intend to use this methodology, and these are the tools that I will use, and these are my expected results, and maybe the time frame. That's what an abstract outlines. So, I haven't said that. What is another key thing now? So, a research writing or in scientific writing, we start with introduction. It is the first chapter that you write. At times, I also say that it can be the last chapter that you write. You start from it and you may actually end with it. It's really important. So what is the introduction? Like the title says it, you are introducing your work. And so with the introduction, there are some key things that we need to understand with introduction. First, it has to specify which subject area your research problem falls in. If you go back a few minutes ago, we said technology employees retention. Which subject area? Maybe that could be management sciences. That could be information and technology. So now, specification of the subject matter has to do with learn a background. So you have to have a background. A background basically specify what you want to study. And I've always said this, when you're writing the background, the basic assumption the researcher holds is that the reader is not conscious, is not aware of what I'm working on. And so I want to teach the reader exactly what I'm talking about so that the person understands. You have a good knowledge of what I'm working on. And so it starts by trying to establish your two key variables, which is a dependent variable I'm working on, employees retention, and this is what employees retention is. And according to employees retention has always been a factor of management style, it has always been a factor of organizational performance, organizational culture, and more to that, it has to do a lot with technology, and that employees retention recently has been affected by technological changes that are taking place in the workplace, such that companies are tilted more towards using machines to do their activity because they're automating and they need fewer workers to do, and machines can do fast tasks. According to A, according to B, according to C. Remember, you are substantiating whatever you're saying with facts. And facts in scientific terms could be citations with authorities. You can start by saying what? Maybe the World Health Organization, or maybe the label, if we talk about this, maybe international label says, especially when you have to write authoritative backing. This is what this authority says. This is what this particular one says. This is what this researcher find out. And so it now lays a foundation for your argument that your topic is useful by presenting to the reader what he or she needs to have a good understanding in the area of interest. So there are many approaches that we can use in writing a background. So I suggest you use a funnel shape. The funnel shape basically says you start from the broad view, you narrow down to your specific context or area of interest. So the broad view here could be, I start from what is happening globally with respect to employees retention on layoff of workers. I narrow it down maybe to a continental, to our own local level, maybe to the specific region that I want to study, maybe division or municipality, whatsoever you want to study. That's the funnel shape approach. Other advocates that you need to use in terms of historic, maybe there is a history for you to tell the people about employees retention over time. You now narrow it down to maybe some key concepts, conceptual, by defining keywords to make the person understand. Remember, we said the essence of a research topic, the essence of the background is to lay a foundation for your researcher, your reader to understand. That's why there are some keywords that you need to define them and contextualize the definition. What do you mean by retention? Is there a specific definition you want to adopt? Or is there a general definition that you're applying and whatsoever? So the keywords that you may need to define to help somebody. Remember, it's not all about giving definition, but you want to contextualize and conceptualize your ideas to give an understanding. Now, once you've done that, the next thing is your work, especially in social management sciences, is guided by theories. Now, how do we differentiate work done in sociology, work done in management, work done in history, work done in maybe humanities, like maybe at different domains? The choice of theories. Because each subject matter or each area of study has a subject or an object of study that predicates the methodology we tend to use. There is that necessity for you to establish what? Theoretical underpinning, theoretical backings to your work. So if I'm dealing with technology, I may want to use TAM, which is a common technology acceptance model. Or I may want to use something resource-based view model, or there are so many different theories. And these theories, they help you to be able to come out with what? Your variables. If you don't take your variables from, or your objectives, or your specific objectives from theories or from empirical studies, believe me, you are laying yourself, you are preparing yourself for a fight you will likely not win. So theories are critical, especially in the social science field, where human reactions or human behavior are guided by what? Abstract theoretical reasoning. For instance, if I'm coming from sociology, I might be talking about the conflict theory. It's a conflict theory that I may want to say we are in a capitalist society where the employers, they keep trying to get more from their employees. And so in case where they think that technology will be able to give them an upper edge over employees, they will lay off employees. That is a reasoning. I'm just giving us an example. So if you have a theory that is backing your argument. But remember, since this is introduction, you are not writing about the entire theory. You just what? Indicate that this is what this study is guided by this theory, which states that in brief, and be a paragraph, and you move on. It can be one or two theory attempts. In a more way you want to develop your work, we need to have at least 3 or 4 theories with a core theory. We have conflicting theories and a theory that you think that is the main theory that's guiding. We'll see as we progress. So that is what we're saying as the background. Then the context. Yes, we have talked about the problem being global, but what has engineered the problem? What has spurred this study at this particular point in time? Where is the study most relevant? So the background is very, very important when you are writing your work. And so when you're writing the background, know that that is the first part that somebody may read and will find interest to go and read the other parts. But again, the entire research process is connected. If a poor background, let's say poor problem statement may bring us a poor review of literature, a poor methodology, and so on and so forth. So it's critical and very, very important for you to understand that background is that each part affects the other. Now, under introduction, you also have explain your research, explain why your research question is important. Why is it important? Why care? Why spend resources to go about conducting a study at this time? Which problem are you trying to solve? And why do we need to solve the problem? Let's get back to our case that we have been using. Should we be worried when companies are laying off workers? Definitely. And so, if companies have always laid off workers and we see an abnormal situation, has it become more necessary to conduct a study? I think so. So you see that laying off of workers is not new, but what has made it very important at this particular moment is the rate and the number that companies are laying off. And it becomes a concern for us that we need to check what is happening and what's the way forward. That's all what research is. If this is what is happening, what can we do? What should companies do? What should employees do? What should those who have been laid off do? It's important. And you think that if we don't solve this problem, we will have a major, bigger challenge to face. And so that's the essence of a problem statement. A problem statement establishes why we need to conduct this study at this particular time. Because there is something definitely wrong with my dependent variable. I want to be very specific. That when you are writing, you understand that the problem should emanate from the dependent variable. Because you want to control, we said we could use technology to solve the employees retention problem, or employees turnover problem. We could use there's economic slowdown or inflation and so on. There's COVID-19. Once you identify that this is where the problem is coming from, then we can solve it. And so for us to do that, we need to conduct a scientific study to achieve this outcome. How do you argue? Some persons say, okay, you have to say according to this. Some will say, no, you don't need to do citation. So there are valid views, but based on your area of study, based on your supervisor, and based on the school or whatever you are writing, specificities matter. But again, regardless of which field, the relevance of the problem or of the research question must be established. And how is this relevant to the field? How is it going to help when you are conducting this study? How is it going to help the management or companies in terms of management? How is it going to help employees who are also affected? How is it going to affect the policy relevance? So the problem statement is critical and says that we need to solve this problem now and not later because of so challenge that we are facing. And if we ignore, then there is big problem, maybe now or long term. Now, then we talk about giving objectives. But what was all along, we are trying to say we have identified an issue, we have examined the existing literature and discovered that there is need to fill this gap by conducting a study. So for us, you need to show what literature says before you move on. And when you are writing the problem, this aspect actually falls under literature review, that identifying the gap and bringing out the theories and laying your debate to prove your relevance or the relevance of the study. So we have talked about the problem, we've talked about the objective, the introduction. One of the things after writing your background and establishing, as you're developing your background and establishing the problem, you now need to know that this problem can be solved in multiple ways. There are different solutions. COVID-19 could be the cause. So if it's COVID-19, how do we solve it? If it is technology, how do we solve it? Solving in code nothing means that you have to give a complete, maybe to stop companies from laying off. It's to give a scientific understanding to what is going on and possible ways to mitigate it. And so to do that, there are varieties of possibilities, and you must take one. Why are you choosing? My worry is that the layoff of worker has been specifically high in the tech industry. So I'm suspecting, I'm feeling that the problem should be from the tech industry. So I now start narrowing in terms of area of study. I have now to narrow in terms of what specific attributes of technology that we will study. I may need to study AI, how AI is changing the work environment, right? That's one aspect of technology that I may need to study what? The rate of technology adoption by companies. If the rate has increased, maybe that's a possibility that you don't need so many workers now, and that's where companies are. So I want to bring out specific areas of interest. That is your specific objective. Now we say we identify the aims and objectives of your research Now, identification of your aim. Now, the aim and objectives, to me, I always look at them to be somehow, but the aim is more generic. For instance, we may want to, based on the example we've been using, one of my aims is to give an understanding to how technology is affecting the working world, especially in terms of employees retention. That can be your overall aim. At times, this aim is not actually measurable. It's not that measurable as compared to what objectives. So objectives are more specific and achievable. So they need to be smart. I'm always say smart, which means specific, measurable, accurate, relevant, and time bound. I think that is Sorry, we had lights went off, and so we just tried to reconnect. Sorry for that interruption. And thank you for staying put as we resume the presentation. So, before the light went off, we were talking about identifying the aims and objectives of your research, which I said is important for you to ensure that literature guides you in establishing your research objective. And literature here, we mean either empirical studies or some theories that gives you, for instance, if I want to use AI, at least there should be either a model that talks about AI as something affecting employees or an element of technology. There should be at least a theoretical backing. If I want to talk about organizational culture, there should be a theory or some other researchers that have used the same. And for you to break down either your technology into different dimensions that form your specific objectives, you need to be informed by what others are doing and what literature says. So, in effect, literature review is critical when you are conducting your research. Actually, I always tell students that literature review is where you start your research and maybe where you end, because you may have to go back there to verify if you're writing, to check if your research goes like that. It is very, very important for you to understand that literature review is critical. So, aims and objectives, what do they help you to achieve? They want you to be able to, what do you want to achieve? Yes, we have said this is what do you intend to achieve? That's the essence of objectives. What are the specific questions that you're asking or hypotheses that you formulate to test or the questions to answer? And how will your research contribute to the advancement of knowledge and practice in your desired field? It's so important that those facts must be established if you want to undertake your study. Now, there is a relationship between hypotheses, research questions, and research objectives that you must be conscious of. Some talk about one-on-one mapping, and some even argue that since objectives, questions, and hypotheses are maybe referring to the same thing, there is no need for us to have all of them. But then my experience and from practice is that they serve different purposes. For instance, your research questions are so important that they help you to know which data you need to collect. I've always talked about research questions. We talk about research questions. Principally, there are three types of research questions for people who are undertaking studies using quantitative techniques: descriptive research questions, correlation or effect research questions, and comparative. You want to describe a scenario, your research question will be more descriptive in nature. We'll try to ask what is, maybe I want to describe the population pattern in Buea. Will be more or less a descriptive study. I can describe Buea in terms of the age, in terms of the gender. I'm just describing, there is no control and there's no interaction, maybe of different variables. We have effect or relationship questions. These are questions that try to establish a relationship between one variable and the other. We talk about technology and employees retention. So there is the control of one to see how it affects the other. Then comparison. I want to see if there's difference between A and B, between one group and another. For instance, is the level of IQ influenced by your ethnic group? Is your level of involvement in business or do where you come from affects how you'll be interested in doing business? Now, those are just questions that we may ask. For instance, at times when we talk about certain tribes that are known for business, is tribe a factor when it comes to business? It could be a whole research question. Intelligence, maybe some tribes come to. Those are possible research questions that you can ask to answer depending on the study that's guiding. And once you come up with these questions, orientate the type of data you collect, whether your data will be quantitative or qualitative, whether you are using existing data or you need to go for new data. So research question, research objective, and your hypothesis. Hypotheses are presumed answers to your question. Yes. Tentatively, I think that your tribe or your ethnic group has an influence on your level of business orientation. Some ethnic groups are more business oriented than others. So there's what? A different kind of research question that you want to see if the level of business orientation is a factor of your ethnic group or your tribe. So, how will your study contribute to the advancement of knowledge and practice in your field? Remember, you are not writing generic. You must have a specific domain you're writing for. The examples we have been giving have been more management oriented or more or less social sciences in general. Let me put it that way. So you must have a specific field, and this study must have an element of contributing to knowledge and affecting practice. Take our example. After conducting the study, how do you think that government or companies will now react to what? Employees retention. We now react to technology adoption as concerns employees retention. What should be the policies that the government should enact to maybe protect employees from employers who may want to optimize their profit at the expense of employees because technology have come? Maybe there's a worry for policymakers. Maybe you want to provide evidence for policymakers to see how there is a need to come in and regulate. There is something that's happening today that has also bring up another new area of research that I think is quite interesting and trending, is the new AI. We've talked about ChatGPT. It's not only ChatGPT, there's so many other AI that are coming up and they're really transforming the world. And so there is a possibility of a lot of ethical or unethical behaviors. And so it becomes a concern for somebody who has an ethical mindset, who thinks that we need to regulate the market. We need to regulate companies' action. We need to regulate the type of applications and systems that people can build with this technology. So you are trying to see how the study will contribute to what? Knowledge, and you contribute to practice. So that is the key thing to note about the background. Now, with respect to literature, we've talked about literature, which we will say it in our subsequent classes or webinars. The literature, we principally can bring our literature into three parts. We have the conceptual, the theoretical, empirical, and maybe the gap. Now, this is not a rubber stamp, but understanding how these key concepts interplay is useful. With a conceptual, you basically want to restate your concepts and define them and explain them and define them as others have done. If I'm defining employees retention, what is it? And who defines employees retention as what? A defines employees retention as the employees turnover as some related concepts, how your two key or the three key concepts relate to come up with a conceptual framework. And then you go on to theories that are guiding your work. We've mentioned you need to have at least 2, 3, 4 theories. I always think that 3 should be ideal, or 4 at most. where one is the main theory. Yes, we review other conflicting or supporting theory, but we have a key theory where your argument is this. When they call somebody you are a Marxist, it means you follow the theoretical reasoning of Marx in your writing or in your principles. We have those who follow the Durkheim's ideology, or we have the social capital of Bourdieu. Those, when you are in sociology, you go to management, you see where they talk about maybe there are theories like the X and Y. So based on the theories we are using, it gives you a direction of school of thought. You fall to a certain school of thought. Maybe you are the realist school of thought. Maybe you are the Marxist school of thought, and so on a different school of thought. Pertaining to your own field, you fall in one category. Which category do you fall? And it should be deliberate, right? Because you try to argue from this person's perspective. You either align with this philosophy or disagree with it. So instead of being pro, you can be anti school of thought. And so empirical. The word empirical is like practice or evidence. The area of study. How many persons who are those who have also studied the same thing or similar? Empirical has to do with real world studies. While theories are more abstract in nature, empirical is evidence that you can go and say, okay, Henry in 2022 conducted a study on the effects of technology adoption on employees' performance in so and so company. We can go and check, it is there. You look at the person's objectives, the person's methodology, the person's instruments, and the rest. Those are very critical things. Because why you are reviewing literature is to help you establish the relevance of your study and to help you guide you on what to do. Your methodology, which is the next thing that we're seeing, is tied to what others have done. Either you align with what others have done or you deviate and justify. That's why under methodology, which is what we're looking at now, you have to describe how you collect your data, how the data will be analyzed and interpreted to help answer your research questions or attain your research objective. Research methodology. Here we're talking about your research design, and there are different designs as we will see in our subsequent classes. Descriptive, or we have surveys, we have experiments, we have quasi-experiments, we have expos. There are different types of designs. Which one are you choosing? Surveys simply means you have to get people's opinion. And use questionnaires, and use structured interviews, and so on. That's surveys. So you need to specify. Now, one key thing to note about methodology is justification. The whole scientific argument is based on why you choose the rationale behind every step. Why did you choose your topic? There is a justification. Why have you chosen these specific objectives? There should be a justification. Why have you chosen to use questionnaires? There should be a justification. Why have you chosen this type of questionnaires? There should be a justification. Why have you? There are lots of why that you need to answer. Your work becomes as relevant as the relevance of your justifications. That's what scientific is. Now, that's why I always say that there's something I've noticed with supervisors who fail to do supervision according to standards. A supervisor looks at a topic and starts telling you what to do with little knowledge about what literature says or how others have been doing it, and gives you research questions and research objectives just by looking at the questions and breaking it and the topic and breaking it down, telling you, study this, study that. I find something wrong with that approach. And so when a supervisor imposes his or her own research questions and objectives to you without a knowledge of what literature says, and these questions are not in line with what literature says, you end up being at a disadvantage point because you have to struggle to go through your writing. And so how do you overcome this? Now, in order for you to overcome it, it might not be in all cases, is to always say, you are adopting this approach or adapting this approach from so and so. I'm using this questionnaire because this person used it and it was validated. That justification is all what science is about. Now, somebody can come into your defense hall, has never read your work, and be able to grade whether you have done a good job or not, because the person is using what? A scientific procedure. There is a methodology that science have put that arrives at their conclusions. And so what the supervisor is there to do is to help you to follow the scientific approach to arrive at this same conclusion so that you can judge whether your work is valid or not. It's not for the supervisor to tell you what to do, per se, person's preferences or person's knowledge. Well, the person's preferences and knowledge can play a role, but principally, the essence of a supervisor is to guide you to achieve your objectives following a scientific approach. And so once you have established the the rationale behind your choices in the methods and approaches, you need to talk about the ethical issues, the limitations and challenges that you anticipate. Ethical, how are you going to do with people participating? Are you going to force people? Are you going to use monetary motivation? Are you going to use incentives or any other thing? How are you going to ensure ethical? Who is approving that you go ahead and study this work? You have approval from an ethical board or from a review board or whatsoever. What are the limitations? What are the perceived or anticipated challenges? And so you do that, you provide enough information with respect to data, sources, the tools or instrument that you will use, and that is what your methodology covers. Now we've talked about the background, a bit on the literature, and now the the introduction, the literature, the introduction. You may not write much on literature. Literature is just something that you do when you are developing the entire work. But you always start from literature because you have to start from searching what has been done before you narrow it down to your specific context. And now it doesn't end there. You have to give us a time frame. You have to share how long do you think the study will take and the various stages. You need to break down, call it milestones, each main task and the milestones that you have to take, the duration with dates. The duration, this one will take 2 months from this. That's duration, the dates. And so that can be done by establishing a Gantt chart. That is what. And it ends with a budget. Before that, you also have to bring a budget, especially for applied researchers or for grants. You need to establish a budget. Even if the work is self-funded, it's always the necessity to give an estimate of how much you think the work would cost in terms of resources, both human and material resources. And then sources justifying your argument, as we have already said. So that's it. We have seen the research proposal. We have Ferdsilinks. We said principally we are looking at the key aspects, and subsequently we'll we'll look at it in details, giving you some examples, the wrong parts and the right parts. So it's important for you to be consistent. And there is an offer that the team decided for anybody that participates, up to 4 webinars will issue you a certificate. So if you participate and you're thinking of getting a certificate that you have taken these trainings, they need to be consistent, and you send in your name so they can know that you've participated. You give your name and your email. So it takes stock after 4 consistent webinars. attending of our webinars, you be issued a certificate, because that is to give you that justification, which is very important in all of today. So I will be taking questions now. We'll take some questions. There are some questions you asked, so that we're able to round off our research proposal webinar. And when you want to evaluate your research proposal, you have to start from identification of the problem, establishing the background to the problem, reviewing literature, establishing a conceptual framework, the objectives, research design, significance, feasibilities, and so on and so forth. That is actually how to assess if you have done a good proposal based on what we have said. So thank you, and I'll take a few questions, and we end it for today. Okay, I think somebody texted a question. Let me check. So I have a question. Okay, it's not a question. The person sent into. Okay, need to take. We have Namundo Claudia Abang. She has sent her email. So any question, any worry? Whether from YouTube, if there's a question, you're free to ask. Okay, I have a question from Taiwan. This one is, what are the reasons why supervisor impose research topics to their students, especially in our context? It's an interesting question. I think to an extent, imposing a research question, a research topic to a student is not a recommended affair or issue. Reason being that the work belongs to the student. At the end of the day, it's his or her work. She is the author and the finisher, and you are just there to help the student to achieve the ultimate results. However, in our community, we may find that some supervisors will say you must work on so and so topic. Some of them do it because they have interest or is their area of expertise, or some may want to publish and they intend to publish in that area. And so what you gives them that possibility of having a ready-made material in one way or the other to use for his or her research writing or for publications. So there can be various reasons, but if you, under normal circumstances, the student should decide for herself or for her, decide which topic to write on. Because one of the things that is the writing exercise is actually just, you need to have interest. You need to have a lot of interest in order to stay put, especially if you're doing a PhD thesis, and you should be able to contribute. So some of them may do it because they want you to on something that has more current and more relevant. So we must not look at it from a negative perspective. Maybe the topic you brought is not that good. And so the one that you should work on is more current, but you need to develop interest and love for that to be able to go through successfully. Now, it's difficult to bypass. Another person asking the question, how can a student do to bypass hindrances by the supervisor? It's quite interesting, but I must say that at times it's quite challenging to do so without the supervisor. In your research work, especially in academia, the supervisor is like the demigod that is like a driver, and so you cannot move the car without the driver. So how do you now manage the challenges of dealing with supervisor? One, you may need to try to, I had an experience, develop an intimate relationship with the supervisor, which in some cases is difficult. So we must acknowledge that. But now as a student, you must be ready to go through difficult times, which is part of the process. Nobody goes through academic writing and come and tell you that was sweet. Partly because of the challenges involved, and one of the challenges is managing the supervisor. So you must learn to manage the supervisor by understanding his or her preferences and by trying to make sure that you work according to specification, maybe in terms of time of meetings, in the approach he wants you to write, and don't argue with him or her by saying that this is what I, even if you have a valid point, it's always recommended that you try as much as possible to use scientific arguments and in a very polite way. It can get tough at times, but that is how you know. Another question says, what will you? I wish to find out that you mentioned that a study needs theoretical backing. What will you do if your theories do not have a direct matching with the variables you intend to use in your work? Do you prefer allow the theories? Allow the theories? I think the short answer to the question is yes. Because now, if the theory cannot provide direct variables, it must have a body of knowledge that support your argument. Only then can you use the theory. But many a times what happens is that supervisors will insist that your variables must come from your theory. Now, if your variables are not emanating from the theory, they can come from empirical studies, which you need to be able to situate the relevance of your theory in supporting those variables, in which case you can still use. But if it's called that your theories cannot address your objectives, cannot address your problem, and none of the parts of your research methodology or your research actually can be traced to that theory, then the best thing is to change the theory and get an appropriate theory. So that's what I can share as that is concerned. Somebody says, what should we consider when we're writing a research proposal for a grant, seeking a grant? Now, whether academics or for grants, there are what we have outlined applies. But now with a grant, there are so many things you need to take into account. For instance, one of the things you may want to consider when you are writing a research proposal for a grant could be, who are you trying to seek the funding from? Who are you expecting that should provide funding? And what are the person's preferences? So you need to know the person's preferences, what the person will require in order for you to be able to do the job. And so that's the first thing. Now the budget becomes very important in the case of a grant, because the budget must be commensurate with what you intend to do or you are suggesting that you will do. So you cannot ask over budget or under budget. If you ask under budget, you suffer when it comes to doing the job. So you must ensure that you think carefully in terms of the resources that you need and in terms of the human, how many persons will be involved in the research and what will they be doing and how much will it cost you? It becomes very critical when you're writing such a proposal because it's more or less applied. Whatever you say, you need to do it accordingly and you will be assessed and evaluated based on what you promise. Now, like we said, a research proposal gives you, it's like a promise of this is what I will do. And so everybody will judge you now, your results based on how much you did with respect to the promises you made. So that is the essence. So when it comes to applied research, it's very, very important for you to take into account the aspect of who is going to fund the project, how much will it cost, and so on and so forth. We may take one last question if there's any, and we'll end while we're waiting for a few questions. I just want to, okay, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening. Sorry to thanks for the great presentation. It's only to chip in something concerning the question on grants. For me, I think most people that we are approaching for grants, at times there are some that have already formats. They have templates that are already designed that we can fill in to meet our that you can fill in our request. Or in cases, if it's an individual or a company that is not
please, please, can you just resume the question? I wasn't getting you at first, so I can get you clearly now.
Yes, I'm talking about the question that came on grants.
Okay.
So I was saying that it can be looked into two angles. Where the one in where the donor has already a template. The other where maybe like a company or an individual that we can seek to approach. We want to approach for a grant. So I think for the donor that is already having a design template is easier. But now for the ones that maybe just a company, what is really the approach that we can use in order to be more attractive?
Okay, thank you for the question. It's quite, he has made an important point. Now, traditionally, if you look at the world of funding, most institutions already have their templates that you need to follow, outlining the various things that they will expect. For instance, there is the objective that you must specify, like we said. Now, if you need to write a proposal that is winning, you must study what the donor wants and structure to meet. But in a case where we don't have a template to use, what do we do? Now, in other where we don't have a template, you go with the standard approach. You need to follow the standard approach, or you look for, if you want to be creative, you look for organizations that are in the same field or in their field and their format and adopt it. There's a possibility that it will be what they want if they don't have one. So for instance, if I'm writing a grant for, let's just take one NGO, let's plan Cameroon and assume that they don't have. So what similar organization do I think that does the same thing? They're in the same line of activities, and do they have a template that I can use? That will help you to also give you information. However, let's assume that after searching, you cannot lay hands on any. Then the right thing for you to do is to use a standard approach that outlines the key headings, like we said. There should be the problem, there should be the objectives, and all of them should be explicit and convincing enough. You must write from a persuasive point of view. Your budgeting needs to be detailed enough and convincing. The time frame must be realistic, and all of that. You must take into account that, because That is what they will use in judging, even if they do not have a pre-established standard that they're expecting for you to give. I hope that answers your question.
Wow, thanks very much. Very explicit.
Thank you, bro. So, any more questions? If there are no questions, I just want to say that it is our desire and objective to keep bringing to us webinars on monthly, maybe depending on the needs. That's why for February we had a series of, and we still intend to have more, because we know that most students now, they're trying to write their proposals. Some of them are already developing their chapter 1. Some of them are doing their literature review, some of them methodology stage. And so we want to partner with you in achieving your success as you go through your academic studies or even your career. So Ferdsilinks has a series of webinars that we're coming up every Saturday that we'll put on Fridays this same time. So it'll be the same time, but we'll always announce. So you need to either belong to our platform, the WhatsApp group, or you subscribe on our YouTube page so that you can always receive updates from there. If we post or we are posting, we go live, you will receive notifications. And more to that, we also have other training programs, which the objective is to empower and help both professionals and students who are seeking to get into their different lives of work. Maybe you are into already working, to add data skills. Now we are living in a world where data is at the center, data is at the core, and all organizations are data driven. And we were all along, we have been talking about companies laying off workers, and we said one of the factors that is contributing to the high layoffs is technology. And this technology comes from the fact that some of these companies have engaged in a lot of data science and machine learning, artificial intelligence, and this helps them to automate. So those who will stay longer in their work will only be those who have some good knowledge in data skills, so that they form part of the decision-making body. As a data scientist or a data analyst or a worker with some data skills, you are more likely to be a partner in the decision-making, because you analyze data, you can argue your points with data. And so we have a series of training that we have launched. We have orientation on Sunday for the data analysis training, which we are training using SPSS, Excel, and Tableau, which are some of the core basic statistical programs that we can use. You don't need programming knowledge. And so we have also data science certification program that runs for 6 months that we also start on Sunday. And that one covers more. We learn Python, we learn R, we learn databases, particularly MySQL, and many others applications. So these are programs that we're rolling out, and many more. So you can try to get in touch with us to get more about these trainings and be a partner to upscale. Whether you are working or not, it will help you to be in a better situation in the world of today. So that is the desire of Ferdsilinks, to help you succeed in your career by bringing short courses that will help you have a competitive advantage in your workplace. And I know that many of us will want to, I believe that we want to get better and get hired. You can still work with these skills. You can work from home. You can work globally, so you're not limited to a confined environment, because with data, whether you're in America or you're in India or you're in Cameroon, once we are giving data and we an expected outcome, the results should be the same. So we're training you for a global relevance, because we focus on global relevance skills like data science, web development, digital marketing, which are the training skills. So if you have interest, you can check on our Facebook, Ferdsilinks, or you check on LinkedIn, Ferdsilinks group, or on Instagram, on most of the social media platforms we are active on. And so it's important for you to check there, as well as you can as well pass by the office or join us on Sunday, 3 p.m. for the orientation for the training programs that are starting. Maybe you'll find one that meets your need to start looking at your career or start a new career. So thank you very much for your time and attention. We will be ending saying bye-bye from here, and always invite your friends to join us so that we learn and grow together. It has been Tingom Ferdinand for Ferdsilinks Data Science Academy.